The echo of a gunshot in the distance made Rosalie Zimmerman flinch as she stood at her bedroom window, her trembling fingers clutching the weathered invitation to the Virginia City social that would mark her first public appearance since arriving in Nevada territory. The year was 1875, and at 22, Rosalie had finally escaped the suffocating confines of Boston society, only to find herself trapped by a new fear: the impending humiliation of her inability to dance at the most important social gathering of the season. Rosalie had arrived in Virginia City just 3 weeks prior, summoned by the death of her only remaining relative, an uncle she'd never met, who had unexpectedly left her his modest home on the outskirts of the booming mining town. The silver mines had transformed Virginia City from a dusty outpost into a thriving community almost overnight. Now, with her inheritance providing her independence, Rosalie had a chance at a new life, if only she could navigate the social waters of this rough-hewn world. She smoothed her hands over her simple blue dress, one of the few items she'd managed to bring west. In Boston, she had always been the awkward wallflower, the girl with books instead of beaux, the one whose mother had never bothered to teach her to dance before consumption claimed her life when Rosalie was just 16. Her father, a stern banker who viewed frivolities like dancing as wasteful indulgences, had followed her mother to the grave last winter after a sudden heart attack, leaving Rosalie truly alone in the world. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She hurried downstairs, her boots making hollow sounds against the wooden floorboards of the unfamiliar house. When she opened the door, she found herself face to face with Mrs. Eleanor Whittaker, the plump, rosy-cheeked wife of the town's general store owner. "Good morning, Miss Zimmerman, Mrs." Whittaker chirped, her arms laden with a basket covered by a checkered cloth. "I brought you some fresh bread and preserves. Figured you might still be getting settled." "How thoughtful of you, Mrs. Whittaker. Please come in." Rosalie stepped aside, grateful for the woman's kindness. In the short time she'd been in Virginia City, Eleanor Whittaker had been one of the few people to make her feel welcome. The older woman bustled into the modest kitchen and set her basket on the table. "So, have you thought about attending the social this Saturday? It would be the perfect opportunity for you to meet folks properly." Rosalie felt her stomach tighten. I'm not certain I should attend." "Nonsense. Everyone will be there. The mine owners, the shopkeepers, the ranchers from the surrounding areas." Mrs. Whittaker's eyes twinkled. "Including some mighty fine, unattached gentlemen who would surely love to make your acquaintance." Rosalie turned away, busying herself with unpacking the basket. "The truth is, Mrs. Whittaker, I don't know how to dance. I never learned. I would only embarrass myself." Mrs. Whittaker's expression softened. "Oh, my dear, is that all? Why, that's easily remedied. I don't see how. The social is only 4 days away. You need a teacher, that's all." Mrs. Whittaker tapped her chin thoughtfully. "And I know just the man." Rosalie shook her head firmly. "No, I couldn't possibly. Owen Thornton," Mrs. Whittaker continued as if Rosalie hadn't spoken. "He owns the Triple T Ranch just outside of town. Best dancer in the territory, I'd wager. Learned from some fancy French instructor who passed through years back, or so they say." "A rancher teaching me to dance?" Rosalie couldn't hide her skepticism. In Boston, dancing masters were refined gentlemen in tailored suits, not rough cowboys with spurs and dust on their boots. "He comes into town today to deliver horses to the livery. I'll speak to him myself." Mrs. Whittaker's tone brooked no argument. "He's a good man, Rosalie. A gentleman, despite his chosen profession." Before Rosalie could protest further, Mrs. Whittaker had already gathered her shawl and was heading for the door. "I'll send word this afternoon." Trust me, dear, you'll thank me come Saturday night." The door closed behind the determined woman, leaving Rosalie alone with her anxiety. She slumped into a kitchen chair, wondering what she had gotten herself into. A dance lesson from a cowboy. The very idea seemed absurd. By late afternoon, Rosalie had nearly convinced herself that Mrs. Whittaker would forget her impulsive plan. She was unpacking books in the small front parlor when another knock came at the door. This one was firmer, more decisive than Mrs. Whittaker's cheerful rap. Smoothing her skirts, Rosalie answered the door and immediately froze. Standing on her porch was the tallest man she had ever seen. At least 6 feet 2 inches, he filled the doorway with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to shrink the space around him. His face, partially shadowed by a well-worn Stetson, was tanned from the sun and framed by dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. Sharp blue eyes assessed her with an intelligence that belied the rough exterior. "Miss Zimmerman." His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that identified him as being from somewhere far south of Nevada. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Owen Thornton." He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair. "Mrs. Whittaker mentioned you might be in need of some assistance before the social." Rosalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm terribly sorry she troubled you with such a trivial matter, Mr. Thornton. I'm sure you have far more important things to attend to than teaching a stranger to dance." A slight smile curved his lips. "Actually, I don't mind at all. Dancing's about the only civilized thing I'm good at, according to my sister." His easy manner helped Rosalie relax slightly. "Still, it seems an imposition." "Not at all. I've been delivering horses in town all day. Teaching you a few steps would be a pleasant way to end it." He glanced past her into the house. "That is, if you're still interested." Rosalie hesitated. The social was only days away, and the thought of standing awkwardly along the wall while everyone else enjoyed themselves was mortifying. And yet, inviting this stranger into her home for private lessons felt scandalous, even in the more relaxed atmosphere of the West. "Perhaps we could use the back garden," she suggested, compromising. "It's relatively flat and there's enough space." Owen nodded. "That would work just fine, Miss Zimmerman. Please call me Rosalie." "Rosalie." The way he said her name, with a slight emphasis on the second syllable, made it sound almost musical. "Shall we begin now, or would another time be better?" Deciding to seize her courage before it deserted her, Rosalie replied, "Now is as good a time as any, Mr. Thornton." "Owen," he corrected with another small smile. She led him through the house to the back door, acutely aware of his presence behind her. The small garden was enclosed by a weathered fence, offering privacy from the neighboring properties. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the packed earth, which was mercifully free of the rocks and brush that dominated much of the Nevada landscape. Owen removed his gun belt, hanging it carefully on the back porch railing, then shrugged out of his denim jacket. Beneath it, he wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. Rosalie tried not to stare. "The social will mainly have waltzes and the Virginia reel," he explained, moving to the center of the garden. "The waltz is simpler to learn, so we'll start there. Have you ever watched others dance?" "Yes, though I've never participated." "That helps. You'll need to follow my lead." He stepped closer, and Rosalie caught the scent of leather and sun-warmed cotton. "I'll place my hand at your waist like so." His touch was light but firm as his large hand settled just above her hip. "And you'll put your left hand on my shoulder." Rosalie complied, trying to ignore the unfamiliar sensation of being held by a man. Owen took her right hand in his left, holding it out to the side. "The waltz is in 3/4 time," he explained. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We'll start simple." I'll step forward with my left foot, you step back with your right. Rosalie nodded, concentrating hard. Ready, and 1. Owen stepped forward, but Rosalie, confused, stepped forward as well. Their boots collided and she stumbled against his chest. I'm sorry, she exclaimed, mortified. Owen steadied her with gentle hands. No harm done. Let's try again. Remember, when I step forward, you step back. It took several more false starts before Rosalie began to understand the pattern. After 20 minutes of practice, they were moving in a small, halting box step around the garden. You're getting it, Owen encouraged. Try to relax a bit. Dancing is supposed to be enjoyable. I'm trying, Rosalie said, her eyes fixed on her feet. I've never been particularly graceful. Look up, he instructed. Look at me, not at your feet. Trust that they'll follow. Reluctantly, Rosalie raised her gaze to meet his. His blue eyes were kind, without a trace of mockery or impatience. Something in her chest fluttered. Better, he said softly. Now feel the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Rosalie gradually relaxed into the dance. There were still missteps and moments of confusion, but by the time darkness descended, she had mastered the basic waltz step. You're a quick study, Owen said as they completed a final turn. He released her, and Rosalie immediately felt the absence of his steadying hand at her waist. Thank you for your patience, she replied, slightly breathless from the exertion and the unexpected intimacy of the lesson. Owen retrieved his jacket and gun belt from the porch railing. We've made a good start, but there's more to learn if you want to be comfortable at the social. I could return tomorrow if that suits you. Yes, Rosalie answered, perhaps too quickly. That would be very helpful. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Tomorrow afternoon, then, same time. I'll be here. As she watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness beyond her garden gate, Rosalie felt a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The dancing lesson had been both more and less uncomfortable than she had feared. More, because of the confusing sensations that Owen Thornton's proximity had awakened in her. Less, because he had been a kind and patient teacher, with none of the condescension she might have expected. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, Rosalie found herself practicing the waltz steps in her bedroom, counting silently as she moved. For the first time since arriving in Virginia City, she felt a glimmer of hope that she might truly belong here. The next afternoon, Rosalie found herself watching the clock, growing increasingly nervous as the hour of Owen's expected arrival approached. She had spent the morning cleaning the already tidy house and had changed her dress twice, finally settling on a simple light green cotton that was practical yet flattering. At precisely 4 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door. She opened it to find Owen standing there, hat in hand, looking even more imposing in the bright daylight than he had in the shadows of the previous evening. "Afternoon, Rosalie," he greeted her. "Good afternoon, Owen. Please come in." She stepped aside, noticing that he had exchanged his dusty work clothes for a clean shirt and trousers. His dark hair was still damp, suggesting he had bathed before coming to see her. "I brought something that might help with our lesson." He held up a small mechanical music box. "Borrowed it from Mrs. Whittaker. Thought having actual music might make it easier to feel the rhythm." Rosalie smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. What a wonderful idea! They made their way to the garden, where Owen set the music box on the porch railing and wound it carefully. A tinkling waltz melody filled the air. "Now, let's see if you remember what we learned yesterday," he said, holding out his arms. To Rosalie's surprise, much of what they had practiced had indeed remained in her memory. Her feet found the pattern more easily, and she managed to maintain eye contact with Owen instead of staring down at their boots. "You've been practicing," he observed with a smile. "A little," she admitted, "though it's different dancing with a partner than alone in my bedroom." "You're doing well. Today, I thought we might add a few turns to make it more interesting." The next hour passed quickly as Owen guided her through more complex movements. His hands were sure and strong, correcting her posture with gentle pressure when needed. Occasionally, when she executed a turn perfectly, his face would light up with genuine pleasure that made Rosalie feel strangely proud. "The Virginia reel is a bit more complicated," Owen explained as they took a brief rest. "It's a group dance with partners facing each other in two lines. There's a lot of changing positions and weaving between other dancers." "It sounds terribly confusing," Rosalie said, dismayed. "It is at first, but once you're in it, you'll find that everyone helps each other along. The community aspect is what makes it fun." He offered her a drink from the water pitcher she'd brought outside. "Tell me, what brought you to Virginia City? Mrs. Whittaker mentioned you're from back east." Rosalie explained about her uncle's unexpected bequest. "I never even knew him, really. He and my father had some falling out years ago before I was born. I received maybe 2 letters from him in my entire life. And yet he left you his house. Apparently he never married or had children of his own. I was his only living relative." She shrugged. "It was fortuitous timing. After my father died, I had few options in Boston." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "The West offers second chances to many. I came here from Texas after the war, needed a fresh start." "You fought in the war?" Rosalie asked, noting how his expression had tightened slightly. "Confederate cavalry. Not something I'm particularly proud of now, but I was young and foolish." He set down his cup. "Shall we try the reel? It's difficult with just 2 people, but I can give you the basic idea." Rosalie recognized his desire to change the subject and didn't press further. Instead, she allowed him to position her for the new dance, listening carefully as he explained the intricate patterns they would need to follow. The reel proved significantly more challenging than the waltz. Without other couples to complete the formation, they had to imagine the full dance, which confused Rosalie repeatedly. By the end of the lesson, she was frustrated and discouraged. "I'm never going to learn this in time," she sighed, pushing a stray lock of hair from her flushed face. "You're being too hard on yourself," Owen said. "No one expects perfection, especially from someone new to town. But I don't want to embarrass myself, or worse, ruin the dance for others." Owen considered her for a moment. "What if we had a practice run with actual partners to dance with?" "What do you mean?" "I know a few families nearby with daughters about your age. Good folks. We could have a small gathering tomorrow to practice the reel properly." He must have seen the panic in her eyes because he quickly added, "Just a handful of people. Informal. It would give you a chance to meet some neighbors and practice in a less intimidating setting than the social." The idea terrified and tempted Rosalie in equal measure. "I wouldn't want to impose on anyone. The Millers have been wanting to meet you anyway. Their daughter Sarah is about your age and new to the area herself, married Frank Miller just last year, and the Johnsons are always up for any excuse to socialize." His smile was encouraging. "What do you say?" Rosalie took a deep breath. "If you truly think it would help." "I do." Owen reached out and briefly squeezed her hand. "Trust me, Rosalie, by Saturday you'll be ready." The casual touch sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with dancing. "All right then. A small practice gathering." Owen left shortly after, promising to arrange everything and return the following afternoon with their practice partners. As Rosalie watched him go, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake in agreeing to his plan. The thought of dancing in front of strangers, even in a small group, made her stomach clench with anxiety. And yet, beneath the fear was a tiny seed of excitement. For the first time in her life, someone believed she could do something she had always thought impossible. The confidence Owen showed in her abilities was both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, Rosalie dreamed of dancing. Not the awkward, stumbling steps of her lessons, but flowing, graceful movements across a polished floor. And always, in her dreams, it was Owen Thornton's steady hands guiding her. The next day brought unseasonably warm weather for early autumn, with clear skies and a gentle breeze that stirred the curtains at Rosalie's open windows. By mid-afternoon, she had worked herself into such a state of nervous anticipation that she jumped at every sound. Certain, it heralded the arrival of Owen and his promised practice partners. When a wagon finally rumbled to a stop outside her house at 4 o'clock, Rosalie peered anxiously through the front window. Owen sat in the driver's seat, next to a middle-aged woman with a kind face. In the back of the wagon were 3 more women of varying ages and 2 men, besides the elderly gentleman who appeared to be the oldest woman's husband. Rosalie smoothed her hair, checked her appearance one last time in the small mirror by the door, and stepped onto the porch to greet her visitors. Owen jumped down from the wagon and came to meet her, his smile warm and reassuring. "Rosalie, I'd like you to meet the Millers and the Johnsons." The introductions were a blur of names and handshakes. Martha and William Johnson were the older couple with their grown daughter Amelia. Thomas Miller was a weathered farmer with calloused hands and a ready laugh. His wife, Beatrice, had the same kind face Rosalie had noticed from the window. Their daughter Sarah was indeed close to Rosalie's age, with a friendly manner and a slight roundness to her figure that suggested she might be in the early stages of pregnancy, though Rosalie was too polite to ask. Frank Miller, Sarah's husband, was the last to be introduced, a tall, lanky man with a shock of red hair and freckles across his nose that made him look younger than his probable 25 years. "We've brought some refreshments," Beatrice Miller announced, holding up a large basket. "And William's brought his fiddle. Can't have proper dancing without music." "That's very kind of you all," Rosalie said, genuinely touched by their generosity. "Please come inside and make yourselves comfortable." While the women bustled into the kitchen to arrange the food, Owen and the men moved the furniture in Rosalie's small parlor, pushing it against the walls to create an open space for dancing. "This was Owen's idea," Sarah confided to Rosalie as they laid out plates of fried chicken and biscuits on the dining table. "He rode out to our place yesterday evening and said the new lady in town needed dancing partners before the social." Her eyes twinkled mischievously. "He spoke very highly of you." Rosalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He's been kind enough to teach me the basics. I'm afraid I'm a very poor student." "Nonsense," Beatrice interjected, overhearing their conversation. "Owen said you picked up the waltz in no time. The reel's trickier, that's all." "That's why we're here." After a light meal that helped ease some of Rosalie's nervousness, William Johnson took up his fiddle. "What shall it be first?" "A waltz to warm up." "Excellent idea," Owen said, appearing at Rosalie's elbow. "Miss Zimmerman, may I have this dance?" With all eyes on them, Rosalie had no choice but to accept. As William drew the bow across the strings, producing a sweet, lilting melody, Owen led her to the center of the cleared space. His hand at her waist felt familiar now, almost comfortable. "Just like we practiced," he murmured. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. To Rosalie's surprise, the steps came naturally. Whether it was the real music, the encouraging smiles of their guests, or simply the additional practice, she found herself moving with more confidence than before. Owen guided her through a series of turns that had her skirts swirling around her ankles, and when the music ended, everyone applauded. "Well done," Thomas Miller called. "The lady can dance." "Now for the real," William announced, launching into a livelier tune. Owen quickly arranged the three couples himself and Rosalie, Frank and Sarah, Thomas and Beatrice in two facing lines. Amelia and her parents sat to the side, clapping in time to the music and calling out occasional instructions. "Ladies to the center," Martha Johnson shouted over the fiddle. "Gents to the center. Now weave." Rosalie tried to follow the patterns, but the rapid changes of direction and partner confused her. Several times she turned the wrong way or moved too slowly, disrupting the flow of the dance. Frustration and embarrassment burned in her chest. After a particularly disastrous tangle that had her colliding with Sarah, Rosalie stepped back, intending to withdraw from the dance entirely. But Owen caught her hand, his expression determined. "Again," he said, not unkindly. "William from the beginning, but slower." The elderly fiddler nodded and began the tune at half its previous tempo. This time, Owen called out each move before it happened, giving Rosalie time to prepare. "Ladies to the center now, back gents forward, back top couple down the middle." By the third repetition, the dance was beginning to make sense to Rosalie. The patterns, which had seemed so arbitrary before, now revealed their logic. She still made mistakes, but fewer with each attempt. "Faster now, William," Owen called after their fifth run-through. The fiddle tempo increased, and to Rosalie's delight, she kept pace. The dance became a whirl of movement and laughter, her hand passing from Owen's to Frank's to Thomas's and back again. When they finally stopped, breathless and flushed with exertion and success, Rosalie felt a surge of triumph unlike anything she'd experienced before. She had done it not perfectly, but passably. "You see," Owen said, his blue eyes bright with satisfaction. "I told you could do it." The impromptu party continued into the evening, with more dancing interspersed with conversation and refreshments. Rosalie found herself drawn into discussions about local events, the upcoming harvest, and gentle inquiries about her life back east. For the first time since arriving in Virginia City, she felt not like an outsider but like a potential friend. As the sun began to set, William Johnson struck up a slow, haunting melody that wasn't suited to either the waltz or the reel. "One more dance before we head home," Owen said, holding out his hand to Rosalie. "This one's simpler than the others. Just follow my lead." The dance was indeed less structured than the waltz, with a swaying, almost dreamlike quality. Owen held her closer than was strictly proper, but in the dim light of the oil lamps, with their newfound friends chatting amongst themselves, Rosalie couldn't bring herself to mind. "Thank you," she said softly, "for arranging all of this. I never would have had the courage to try on my own." "You're braver than you give yourself credit for," Owen replied. "It takes courage to leave everything you know and start fresh in a strange place." "Sometimes circumstances don't leave much choice," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "True enough, but you're making the best of it." That counts for something. When the music ended, Owen's hands lingered at her waist for a moment longer than necessary. Something unspoken passed between them, a current of awareness that made Rosalie's breath catch. The moment was broken by Thomas Miller announcing it was time to head home before full darkness made the roads treacherous. There was a flurry of activity as dishes were washed, furniture rearranged, and goodbyes exchanged. Promises were made to see each other at the social on Saturday. Beatrice Miller insisted that Rosalie sit with their family, and Sarah extracted a promise that they would call on each other soon. As the wagon pulled away, carrying the Millers and Johnsons back to their homes, Owen remained behind, helping Rosalie straighten the last of the furniture. "Will you be all right?" he asked. "For the social, I mean." "I think so," Rosalie answered honestly. "I'm still nervous, but at least now I know I won't completely humiliate myself." "You'll do more than fine," he assured her. "You're a natural once you stop overthinking it." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "I should go," Owen finally said. "Got an early start tomorrow. Cattle drive coming through that I need to meet." "Of course." Rosalie walked him to the door. "Thank you again, Owen, for everything." He paused on the threshold, turning back to her with an expression she couldn't quite read in the dimness. "It was my pleasure, Rosalie. Truly." After he left, Rosalie stood at the window, watching his tall figure stride away into the night. She touched her waist where his hands had rested, still feeling the phantom pressure of his fingers. It occurred to her that, after Saturday's social, there would be no more dancing lessons, no more reason for Owen Thornton to call at her house. The thought brought an unexpected pang of loss. The next day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Rosalie practiced her dancing steps whenever she had a free moment, determined not to forget anything Owen had taught her. She also prepared her best dress, a deep blue taffeta with delicate lace trim that had been one of her few indulgences in Boston. It was perhaps a bit formal for Virginia City, but it was the nicest thing she owned. By Saturday afternoon, her stomach was in knots. What if she forgot everything once she was at the social? What if the other townspeople weren't as welcoming as the Millers and Johnsons? What if Owen was busy with other partners and didn't have time to help her through the difficult dances? A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. She opened it to find Mrs. Whittaker standing there with a small box in her hands. "I thought you might like to borrow these for tonight," the older woman said, opening the box to reveal a pair of pearl earrings. "They were my mother's. Not real pearls, mind you, but they catch the light beautifully." "Oh, Mrs. Whittaker, I couldn't. Nonsense. Every lady needs something special for her first social." Mrs. Whittaker pressed the box into Rosalie's hands. "Owen stopped by the store this morning, said you're quite the dancer now." Rosalie blushed. "He exaggerates. I can manage the basic steps, that's all." "That's more than some who have lived here all their lives," Mrs. Whittaker said with a laugh. "Now the social starts at 7. My Herbert will drive us in our wagon, so we'll collect you at 6:30. That way you won't have to walk there in your finery." After Mrs. Whittaker left, Rosalie spent the remaining hours bathing and preparing with meticulous care. She arranged her dark hair in a simple but elegant style, with soft curls framing her face. The borrowed pearl earrings did indeed catch the light beautifully, complementing the blue of her dress. When the Whittakers arrived to collect her, both husband and wife exclaimed over her appearance. "My dear, you'll be the belle of the social," Eleanor declared. "Won't she, Herbert?" Herbert Whittaker, a quiet man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, nodded in agreement. "Very nice indeed, Miss Zimmerman." The community hall was already filling with people when they arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the wooden floor that had been cleared for dancing. At one end, tables were laden with food brought by various townspeople: pies, cakes, fried chicken, and other delicacies. A small group of musicians was tuning up on a raised platform. Rosalie scanned the crowd anxiously, looking for a familiar face. She spotted the Johnsons near the refreshment table and the Millers by one of the windows, but there was no sign of Owen. "Rosalie, over here." Sarah Miller waved enthusiastically, beckoning her over. Grateful for the friendly face, Rosalie made her way through the crowd. Sarah looked pretty in a yellow dress that complemented her fair coloring, and Frank stood proudly beside her in a clean suit that still bore the creases of being recently unpacked. "You look beautiful," Sarah gushed, taking Rosalie's hands. "That blue is perfect with your complexion." "Isn't she lovely, Frank?" Frank nodded politely. "Very nice, Miss Zimmerman. Please call me Rosalie, and thank you both." More people streamed in as 7 o'clock approached. Rosalie was introduced to what felt like half the town: the blacksmith and his wife, the school teacher, several miners and their families, the banker, the sheriff. Names and faces blurred together, but everyone was welcoming, curious about the newcomer from Boston. When the music began, Rosalie felt a moment of panic. The first dance was to be a waltz, and she still didn't see Owen anywhere. Would it be improper to dance with someone else after he had taught her? Would he mind? As if summoned by her thoughts, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "Miss Zimmerman, may I have this dance?" She turned to find Owen standing there, looking almost unrecognizable in a formal black suit and crisp white shirt. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he had clearly shaved for the occasion. Without his usual dusty clothes and hat, he cut an impressive figure that drew admiring glances from several ladies nearby. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come," Rosalie said, accepting his outstretched hand, "and miss seeing the results of all our hard work." "Never." He led her onto the dance floor as the musicians launched into a waltz. "Besides, I promised you the first dance. Did you?" "I don't recall that." "Well, I promised myself then." His hand settled at her waist, a touch that now felt wonderfully familiar. "You look beautiful tonight, Rosalie." The compliment warmed her from within. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." Owen chuckled, the sound rumbling deep in his chest. "Don't sound so surprised." As they moved across the floor, Rosalie was pleased to discover that all their practice had indeed paid off. She followed Owen's lead confidently, her feet remembering the patterns without conscious thought. When he guided her through a series of turns, she executed them flawlessly, her skirts swirling around her ankles. "See," Owen murmured, "you're a natural." The dance ended all too soon, and as custom dictated, Rosalie found herself with a different partner for the next one. Frank Miller claimed her for a polka, followed by the elderly banker for another waltz. Each time, she managed the steps without mishap, growing more confident with every dance. When the musicians announced the Virginia reel, Rosalie felt a momentary flutter of anxiety. But as couples lined up in two facing rows, she found Owen opposite her, his encouraging smile calming her nerves. The reel was indeed more challenging with a full complement of dancers, but Rosalie discovered that the Millers had been right. Everyone helped each other through the complex patterns. When she momentarily forgot which way to turn, Sarah gave her a gentle push in the right direction. When another woman became confused, Rosalie was able to guide her, surprising herself with her newfound knowledge. By the time the musicians paused for a break, Rosalie's cheeks were flushed with exertion and pleasure. She had danced every dance, never once having to sit along the wall as she had feared. Several people had complimented her dancing, never suspecting that just days ago she had been completely ignorant of the steps. Owen found her by the refreshment table, where she was gratefully accepting a cup of punch from Mrs. Whittaker. "Having a good time?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Better than I could have imagined," Rosalie admitted. "Everyone has been so kind. That's Virginia City for you." Rough around the edges, but good-hearted. Mrs. Whittaker excused herself to speak with another guest, leaving Owen and Rosalie alone in their corner of the busy room. "I wanted to thank you properly," Rosalie said, "for teaching me, for arranging the practice session, for everything, really." "No need for thanks. It was my pleasure." Owen's expression grew more serious. "Actually, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Before he could continue, they were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. A group of miners had arrived late, already boisterous from drinking at the saloon before the social. Their loud voices cut through the genteel atmosphere, drawing disapproving looks from several of the older attendees. The sheriff moved quickly to intercept them, speaking in low, firm tones. Most of the miners settled down, but one, a burly man with a wild beard and bloodshot eyes, continued to be disruptive. "Come now, Blackwell," the sheriff was saying as they drew nearer to where Rosalie and Owen stood. "Either behave yourself or head back to the saloon." "It's a public gathering, ain't it?" Blackwell slurred. "I got as much right to be here as any." His gaze fell on Rosalie, and a leering grin spread across his face. "Well, hello there, pretty lady. You're new in town." Rosalie instinctively stepped back, uncomfortable with the man's attention. Owen moved slightly in front of her, his posture tense. "The lady's not interested, Blackwell," he said evenly. "Move along." Blackwell's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Since when do you speak for the ladies, Thornton? Let her decide for herself." "Mr. Blackwell, is it?" Rosalie found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "I appreciate your interest, but I'm currently engaged in conversation with Mr. Thornton." Blackwell's face darkened. "Hoity-toity, ain't ya? Too good for a working man." "That's enough," the sheriff interjected firmly. "Outside, Blackwell." Now, for a tense moment, it seemed the miner might refuse, but after glaring at Owen, he allowed the sheriff to escort him out, muttering curses as he went. "I apologize for that," Owen said once Blackwell was gone. "He's got a mean streak when he drinks, which is most of the time lately." "It's not your fault." Rosalie was shaken but determined not to let the incident ruin her evening. "What were you about to ask me before we were interrupted?" Owen hesitated, glancing around at the crowded hall. "It can wait. This isn't the right place." The musicians had returned and were starting up again. This time, they played a slower, more intimate waltz. Without asking, Owen took Rosalie's hand and led her onto the dance floor. As they moved together to the gentle melody, Rosalie was acutely aware of Owen's proximity, of the strength in his arms as he guided her through the steps that now felt as natural as breathing. Something had changed between them, a shift in the atmosphere that made every touch seem more significant. "Would you be willing to go riding with me tomorrow?" Owen asked suddenly. "There's a place not far from my ranch, a meadow overlooking the valley. It's pretty this time of year with the aspens turning gold." Rosalie looked up at him in surprise. "You want to take me riding, if you'd like to go." His expression was uncharacteristically uncertain. "It would give us a chance to talk properly, away from prying eyes and interruptions." The invitation was clearly more than a casual outing between friends. Rosalie thought of the way Owen had looked at her during their dance lessons, the gentle pressure of his hands guiding her, the warmth in his eyes when she mastered a difficult step. Was it possible that he felt the same inexplicable attraction that had been growing in her? "I would like that very much," she replied softly, "though I should warn you I'm not much of a horsewoman." Owen's face brightened with a smile that made her heart skip. "Don't worry. I've got a gentle mare who'll take good care of you. I'll come by around noon if that suits you." "It does." The dance ended, and they reluctantly separated as other partners claimed them for the next set. For the remainder of the evening, Rosalie was constantly aware of Owen's presence in the room, even when dancing with others. Occasionally their eyes would meet across the crowded floor, and the look they exchanged sent a thrill of anticipation through her. By the time the social wound down in the late hours, Rosalie's feet ached pleasantly from dancing, and her face hurt from smiling. As promised, the Whitacres drove her home, with Mrs. Whitaker chattering excitedly about what a success the evening had been. "You were the talk of the social, my dear. No one would ever guess you just learned to dance this week." The older woman gave her a knowing look. "And I couldn't help but notice how often Mr. Thornton sought your company." "He was simply being kind to a newcomer," Rosalie demurred, though she couldn't suppress a smile. "If you say so, dear." Mrs. Whitaker didn't sound convinced. He's a good man, Owen Thornton, one of the best in the territory. His ranch is prospering, and he treats his workers fairly. Any woman would be fortunate to catch his eye. Rosalie made no reply, but as she prepared for bed that night, Mrs. Whittaker's words echoed in her mind. Was it possible that a man like Owen, established, respected, undeniably handsome, could be interested in her? The plain, bookish girl who had never caught anyone's attention in Boston. The thought kept her awake far into the night, anticipation for tomorrow's ride making sleep elusive. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn day. Rosalie dressed with care in her most practical skirt and a sturdy blouse, then fretted about whether she should have chosen something more feminine. She was just considering changing again when a knock at the door announced Owen's arrival. He stood on her porch in his usual ranch clothes, looking far more at ease than he had in his formal suit at the social. 2 horses waited patiently behind him, his own tall bay gelding and a smaller, dappled mare with a gentle eye. "Good morning," Owen greeted her, his smile warm. "Ready for an adventure?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Rosalie replied, trying to hide her nervousness. "Though I should warn you again, I haven't ridden much. Daisy here will take good care of you." Owen patted the mare's neck. "She's steady as they come." With his help, Rosalie mounted the horse, arranging her skirt as modestly as possible while still sitting comfortably in the saddle. Owen adjusted the stirrups for her, his hands efficient but respectful. "Just relax and let her follow my horse," he instructed. "Hold the reins lightly, she knows what to do." They set off at a walk, Owen leading the way through the outskirts of Virginia City and into the surrounding countryside. As they left the buildings behind, the landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and occasional stands of pine and aspen. The air was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of dust and sun-warmed earth. True to Owen's word, Daisy needed little guidance, content to follow his gelding at a steady pace. As Rosalie's initial tension eased, she began to enjoy the gentle rhythm of the horse's movement and the stunning vistas that opened up around each bend in the trail. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked as they rode side by side along a wider section of the path. "Almost 5 years now," Owen replied. "Came to Nevada with barely enough money for a stake claim, worked the mines for a while, then as a hired hand on several ranches until I could afford my own place. Started with just 50 acres and a dozen cattle. Now I've got 300 acres and a decent-sized herd." "That's impressive," Rosalie said sincerely. "You must have worked very hard." "Hard work never bothered me. It was the loneliness that was tougher to handle." He glanced at her. "What about you? Was it difficult to leave Boston behind?" Rosalie considered the question. "Not as difficult as I expected. After my parents died, there wasn't much holding me there. I had acquaintances rather than friends, a position as a companion to an elderly lady that barely paid enough to live on, and few prospects for improvement. No suitors." Owen asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Forgive me, that's too personal a question." "It's all right," Rosalie assured him. "And no suitors. I was never the sort of young woman who attracted that kind of attention in Boston society. Too bookish, too serious, not accomplished enough in the things that mattered there." "Their loss," Owen said simply, with a certainty that made Rosalie's heart flutter. They rode in companionable silence for a while, climbing steadily into the foothills. The trail narrowed again, forcing them to ride single file, with Owen leading the way. Finally, they emerged into a high meadow that took Rosalie's breath away. Just as Owen had promised, a grove of aspens bordered the open space, their leaves a brilliant gold against the blue sky. The meadow itself was carpeted with late-blooming wildflowers, and beyond it, the land fell away dramatically, offering a panoramic view of the valley below, with Virginia City visible as a cluster of buildings in the distance. "Oh," Rosalie breathed, reining in beside Owen. "It's beautiful. I thought you might like it." He dismounted and came to help her down. His hands spanned her waist, lifting her easily from the saddle. When her feet touched the ground, he didn't immediately let go, and for a moment they stood close enough that Rosalie could feel the warmth radiating from him. Owen cleared his throat and stepped back, turning to retrieve a bundle from his saddlebag. "I brought some food, thought we might have a picnic." He spread a blanket on the grass, then unpacked bread, cheese, apples, and a bottle of cider. As they ate, sitting side by side with the spectacular view before them, conversation flowed easily between them. Owen told stories of his early days ranching, of the characters he'd met in Virginia City, of his dreams for expanding his herd. Rosalie shared memories of Boston, her love of books, her tentative hopes for making a life in Nevada. "What will you do here?" Owen asked. "Have you thought about it?" Rosalie shook her head. "Not specifically. My uncle left me enough to live on modestly for a while, but eventually I'll need to find some occupation. Perhaps teaching if the school needs another instructor." "You'd be good at that," Owen said. "You're patient. I saw that during our dancing lessons." The mention of their lessons brought a smile to Rosalie's face. "I still can't believe how well it turned out. I was so afraid of making a fool of myself at the social." "You were the most graceful dancer there," Owen said, his voice softening. "When you were in my arms, it felt like you'd been dancing all your life." A blush warmed Rosalie's cheeks at the intensity in his gaze. "I had an excellent teacher." "Rosalie." Owen set aside his plate and turned to face her fully. "There's something I need to tell you. The reason I wanted to bring you here today." Her heart began to race. "Yes. From the moment I first saw you standing in your doorway, looking so brave and so afraid at the same time, something about you caught me." He took her hand in his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "These past few days, teaching you to dance, getting to know you, they've been the happiest I can remember in a long time." Rosalie could hardly breathe. "They've been wonderful for me too. I know it's fast. We've only just met. But out here, things move differently than in the East. Life is harder, shorter sometimes. Makes a man recognize what matters when he sees it." Owen's blue eyes held her steadily. "What I'm trying to say, probably badly, is that I care for you, Rosalie, more than I thought possible in such a short time, and I'd like your permission to court you properly." Joy bubbled up inside her, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." Owen's face broke into a smile so radiant it transformed him. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle yet full of promise. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and Rosalie leaned into his touch, savoring the warmth and tenderness of the moment. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since our first dance lesson," he confessed. "I've been wanting you to," Rosalie admitted with a small laugh. They stayed in the meadow until late afternoon, talking, sharing occasional kisses and making plans. Owen spoke of showing her his ranch, of introducing her to his foreman and the handful of cowboys who worked for him. Rosalie told him about the books she hoped to have shipped from Boston, and how she wanted to plant a proper garden behind her house come spring. It was only when the sun began to dip toward the western horizon that Owen reluctantly suggested they head back to town. The ride home was filled with a comfortable closeness, their horses walking side by side whenever the trail permitted. At Rosalie's door, Owen kissed her once more before reluctantly taking his leave, promising to call on her the following evening after he finished his work at the ranch. Over the weeks that followed, their courtship blossomed under the watchful but approving eyes of Virginia City. Owen visited Rosalie whenever his ranch duties allowed, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book he thought she might enjoy. Wildflowers gathered along the trail, once a delicate silver hair comb he'd purchased from a traveling peddler. Rosalie began to integrate herself into the community, helping at the church socials, assisting Mrs. Whittaker with inventorying the store, and eventually, as she had hoped, securing a position as an assistant at the schoolhouse 3 days a week. Her circle of friends expanded beyond the Millers and Johnsons to include many of the townsfolk she had met at the social. As autumn deepened toward winter, Owen invited Rosalie to visit his ranch for the first time. The Triple T was everything he had described: 300 acres of good grazing land with a sturdy main house, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, a barn, and various outbuildings. The house itself was simple but well built, with a large kitchen, a comfortable parlor, and several bedrooms upstairs. "I built most of it myself," Owen told her as he showed her around. "Added on as I could afford to." "It's wonderful," Rosalie said sincerely. She could easily imagine a life here, tending a kitchen garden, reading by the fire in the parlor, children running through the rooms. The thought startled her with its clarity and intensity. But as she glanced at Owen, watching her reaction to his home with barely concealed hope in his eyes, she knew it wasn't premature. In the short time they had known each other, her feelings for him had grown from attraction to deep affection, to something she could only call love. That evening, as Owen drove her back to town in his wagon, snow began to fall, the first of the season. Fat, lazy flakes drifted down, melting as they touched the ground but promising the winter to come. "I love you, Rosalie," Owen said suddenly, his voice clear and certain in the quiet night. "I think I've loved you since I saw you dance for the first time, really dance, without fear holding you back. You were so beautiful, so full of joy. I knew then that I wanted to spend my life making you that happy." Tears pricked at Rosalie's eyes, but they were tears of happiness. "I love you too, Owen, more than I ever thought possible." He pulled the wagon to a stop, not caring that they were still a good mile from town. Taking her face in his hands, he kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. "Marry me," he whispered against her lips. "Be my wife, my partner. Share my life, my ranch, my future." "Yes," Rosalie answered without hesitation. "Yes, with all my heart." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Virginia City, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Whittaker cried happily throughout the ceremony. The Millers and Johnsons beamed from the front pew. Even the gruff sheriff removed his hat respectfully, as Owen and Rosalie exchanged their vows. Rosalie wore a new dress of ivory silk that she and Sarah Miller had worked on together, and Mrs. Whittaker's pearl earrings, a wedding gift from the older woman, who had become like a mother to her in the months since her arrival in Nevada. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the community hall, the same one where the fateful social had been held. This time, when Owen led Rosalie onto the dance floor for their first waltz as husband and wife, there was no trace of the nervous young woman who had been so afraid of dancing. In her place was a confident bride, moving in perfect harmony with her husband as the townspeople applauded. "Now you're ready," Owen whispered in her ear as they danced, echoing the words he had said at the end of their final lesson before the social. "Ready for what?" Rosalie asked, smiling up at him. "For everything. For this life we're building, for all the joy and challenges ahead." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "For our future together." As the snow fell gently outside, blanketing Virginia City in white, Rosalie and Owen danced on, surrounded by friends who had become family, secure in the knowledge that what had begun as a simple dancing lesson had grown into a love that would last a lifetime. 5 years later, the Triple T Ranch had nearly doubled in size, and the main house had expanded to accommodate a growing family. Rosalie stood on the front porch, watching as Owen taught their 4-year-old son James to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter Elizabeth played at her feet, while the newest addition to the family, 3-month-old Thomas, slept peacefully in her arms. The years had brought changes to Virginia City as well. The silver mines were producing less, but the town had established itself as an important stop on the trading routes. The Whittakers had retired, selling their store to a young couple from Sacramento. Sarah and Frank Miller had 3 children of their own now and had built a new house closer to town. But some things remained constant, like the monthly socials at the community hall, where dancing and conversation still brought the community together. Rosalie never missed one if she could help it, and neither did Owen. They always made sure to dance at least one waltz together, a private reminder of how their love story began. As James squealed with delight at his accomplishment on the pony, Owen looked up and caught Rosalie's eye across the yard. The love and contentment in his gaze still made her heart skip, even after all these years. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Owen found Rosalie in the parlor, gazing out at the star-filled Nevada sky. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Thornton," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was just thinking about how differently my life might have turned out if I hadn't been brave enough to let you teach me to dance." She turned in his embrace to face him, or if Mrs. Whittaker hadn't been so determined to meddle. Owen chuckled. "We'll have to name our next child after her as thanks." "Next child?" Rosalie raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't suppress a smile. "Thomas is barely 3 months old. I'm just planning ahead." Owen's eyes twinkled mischievously. "After all, we have plenty of room, and I seem to recall you mentioning once that you'd always wished for a large family." "That's true." Rosalie stood on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "And I can't think of anyone I'd rather build that family with than you." In response, Owen took her hand and led her to the center of the parlor. Without a word, he placed his other hand at her waist and began to hum the waltz that had played during their first dance at the social. Rosalie fell naturally into step with him, their bodies moving in the perfect harmony that comes only with years of loving intimacy. Outside, the moon rose over the Nevada mountains, casting silver light across the land they had made their own. And in the warm parlor of the ranch house, Owen and Rosalie danced together, just as they had that first day in her garden, just as they would for all the days to come, 2 souls who had found in each other not just a dance partner, but a true companion for life's journey.